Welcome to the Freelance Tribe. Here we talk with skilled freelancers about their professional journey. Stay tuned for real life experiences to learn and actionable steps to take to improve your freelancing career. My name is Yuri. I'm a community builder at Code Control and 9am.works, and my guest is Jeremy Coffey, a freelance program manager and project and team leader whose superpower is aligning clients' activities and building products with their stated objectives while constantly bringing a team's focus back to what matters most. And today, we'll discuss how to talk to clients and teams in a way that they listen to you and work together towards a mutual goal. So, welcome, Jeremy.
Great to be here, Yuri. Thanks for having me.
So, the first question, how do you start a conversation with a client in a way that sets the stage for productive collaboration?
I start every conversation with some invitation to learn more about the person that I'm with. If they're curious about me, then I try to find a way to make something general, something interesting out of their question. I feel like that's a piece of hospitality, a piece of service that everyone can offer. Just answering questions in an open way that allows for them to plug into the conversation with some of their own experiences, and then look for ways to, I think, build avenues into their life, into their experience, into what motivates them. Because ultimately, every system is a people system. It doesn't matter what you're designing or what you're building or what the program is that you're trying to put together, what the business goal is. It's made up of people. And the people who are inside it have their own agendas, their own concerns, their own plans, their own timelines. And especially if you're a freelancer, it doesn't matter who's asking you in, how high level they are, how excited people are or seem about the project. It's going to be disruptive. You're going to be changing something about how that system operates, and you need to be extremely thoughtful, careful, I'd say empathetic to the people that you're interacting with. So I like to come in very softly, very kindly, and get to know the people and begin to map out the people systems that I'm in. So really get I mean, in kind of the jargon, we call it stakeholder mapping. But what that
Hmm.
means is, who am I going to be disrupting? How much am I going to be disrupting them? And how upset are they going to be about being disrupted? Because some people welcome it. They say, great, this is a mess. Please fix it. Thank you. Other people, are much more, I think, protective of the decisions that were made and their role in it. And they really want to tell you a story about why something is the way it is, or what things need to be sort of kept in place. And my role coming in, from the outside, is to make sure that their concerns are heard, and if at all possible, that the system that I'm designing and implementing with them is able to meet each of those demands. Now, that's not 100% possible all the time, but it is much more possible if you're listening and if you're talking. So I rarely start the, say, first conversations I have with stakeholders with a, here's what I'm doing, here's the agenda, we're going to push through, here's the timeline. It's always more of a, let's get to know each other, let's find out something about each other, let's create some commonality in this relationship, so that we really understand that we're people working together.
How do people usually react to this approach?
Usually very well. I've only had a few times where someone's like, just like, hurry up, let's get to business. And at that point, that's easy, right? Like that, then we're just skipping right to step two. And this isn't dating. Like if they have something that they want to rush into professionally, then I'm here to facilitate that. But most people want to take that time. Most people want to get to know me. They want to get to understand, what motivates my participation in their project,
Mhm.
because again, I'm coming in from the outside, so they understand I'm being brought in to work on a particular part of their business or their program, and they really do need to feel some comfort in that. And handing someone a resume, giving someone a list of references, that doesn't give them nearly so much comfort. It's just having a good conversation with them to open things up. Yeah.
Did you notice somehow some kind of differences between those clients with whom you have this conversation when you get to know each other and with those who want to jump right to the point? The differences in how the project going on later on.
A lot of that has to do with who I was involved with, say, pre-sale or as I was being brought into the organization. Because I would say, to be very general about it, the higher level the stakeholder, the less time they have for
Mm,
getting to know you, and the less they really care about just like how your personality is going to fit. They're bringing you on for a job and they want to see that job done. So they want to know, what are your KPIs? Where's your dashboard? How are you going to measure this? What are your timelines? And that's all very understandable. You have to be able to deliver that. That's the job at the end of the day. When you move then into each of those verticals that you're going to be measuring, that you're going to be updating or changing in some way, that's when you begin to interact with all those people systems that I was talking about. So typically, the person who's bringing me on has a goal in mind. They have kind of an objective, a vision for where they're going to take everyone, and they think, okay, Jeremy can facilitate that. And I take that very seriously. I'm very honored, I'd say, every time that I get selected for that role. However, I understand, okay, I have a duty to them to be clear, to be as honest and as data driven as I can be. However, the moment I step into one of those teams, I have to make sure that I'm introducing myself into that system in as complementary a way as possible. I'll also, because there is I think, a difference in the way that, say, developers are viewed. People often think like, oh, like if you have a background in computer science or if you've, been a software engineer for a long time, you just want facts, you just want things. That is not my experience. My experience is, especially if you're coming in and you're working on a product or you're working on a build with these software engineers, it's really important that you get to know them, that you get to know how they like to communicate, how they like to take care of their tasks, how they like to be tasked, so that you're fitting in as seamlessly to the way that they work and really adjusting to the way that they are able to be productive as much as possible. And that requires a conversation about those things. You can't just come in and be like, I guess that you're like this because, you have this degree or something. So I wouldn't say that there's a like left brain, right brain divide or some divide, between sales and engineering. I would say it's much more about how much time does this person have to give me about this.
yeah.
And yeah, the executives are just going to have less time. That's the nature of the game.
Out of what I hear from you, it sounds like you really know how to talk to people, but I'm curious if you ever was that way. And before you answer, just a follow-up question. What are or what were some communication mistakes that you've made, and then what did you learn from them?
Okay, there are three parts to that question. The first is about my history as a communicator, and then the second is about mistakes I've made, and then the third, learning. So I'll take them in order. Uh, I recognized, in university, that I was a very poor communicator. That that as much as I liked talking, it was hard for me to really connect with people, and I felt that there was this disconnect so often, and I couldn't understand why. And I thought, oh, I'm just not giving people enough information. I should just talk more, or like just look for the things that we have in common and just go full bore on what I know about all those things. And that wasn't working. And so I came up with a plan to work in hospitality. I was like, I can
Mm,
be a barista, I can be a server, and I'll get a lot of repetitions communicating with people. And I'll just have to learn how to communicate, short, transactional, necessary details. Um,
yeah.
and kind of layer on some personality there. And I spent longer in hospitality than I thought I would initially. However, I loved every minute of it because I got to be communicating in ways and essentially like working on that skill and honing that skill, but communicating in ways that I thought, okay, this is really enhancing my skill set as a communicator. So yeah, it was putting in the work and the time and identifying essentially a hack for how I was going to just learn to communicate more effectively. The biggest communication mistakes, I mean, this is a very common and big one, talking too much about myself. People just don't care, right? Like they have their own lives. Their own lives are equally, if not more fascinating than whatever you're going to tell them about yours. So I learned that very early on that people don't care about biographical details unless they ask. And if they ask, it's often just to be like kind. It's like talking about the weather. Um, and what did I learn from that? The hardest thing really was learning how to ask better questions.
Hmm.
It's sometimes just as easy as why or what interested you about that. What do you like about living in Berlin? Like those sorts of things. And then getting people to talk about themselves and the things that motivate them and drive them. Uh, that took even more time, right? So that wasn't just, oh, hey, I figured that out from, all of my kind of transactional, conversations in hospitality. That took an extra bit of work and research to really understand, okay, here are the communication frameworks that fit for the various conversations that I need to have.
When you ask some personal questions, how do you feel the moment when it's time to switch to talk about business?
I like to glide into business conversations. So I don't want there to feel like there's one end moment where we just fall off a cliff and all of a sudden it's business, because that makes the conversation that led up to it feel a little phony.
Yeah.
It makes it sound like I was just warming you up for the business portion. So I'll have an intro section and then I'll look for a way to pivot. There are always in conversations places where you can pivot into something that's related to the task at hand, because at the end of the day, you're all there to get something done. So the thing that you have most in common is that thing that you're going to do. Pivoting into that in some way, even awkward, sometimes amusing segues, just gets some of the pressure out of the room and lets people focus on the one or two details that you really need to hone in on at that particular meeting.
It's always nice when people are open with you and they happy to continue the conversation, and then you understand each other and everyone's great and everyone's happy, and then it's a fairy tale. But I'm curious, if a client disagrees with something that you're talking about, for example, you recommend, you tell them what to do, or like not in the way like you command them, but you propose what to do, like how to work on this better, and they disagree. How do you usually respond to keep this conversation productive?
That's less about, I'd say, having a good just like back and forth conversation and more about practicing diplomacy and being respectful of their position and understanding that I'm here to bring solutions. And if the solutions, and it is rare that I'll bring just one and say, this is the only thing that you can do to solve this problem. Because if we're being creative in the sort of option generating space, then we're going to have multiple avenues to get to the objective. So I'm less a, say, conduit for the one right answer and more an option generating machine. So someone who brings you a menu of potential solutions and talks through the
Hmm.
various scenarios that those are going to unlock. If someone says, all of these are trash, you did a very bad job, then that tells me, okay, I missed something in one of the previous steps, and I didn't sufficiently communicate to them what we were going to be bringing into this meeting, right? That's a breakdown, and that would be my fault, because people need to be prepared for what they're going to hear. People need to see the work that you've done leading up to it. If they want to dive all the way in, great. They can kind of take a look at all the details. Generally, people don't. They just want to say, okay, what's on the agenda? What are the proposed solutions? Wonderful. I learned this. I'd say in my first project manager role in tech, no one no one likes to be surprised in a meeting. I
Mm.
like no one loves a ta-da, we solved it. Because that feels like an ambush, right? They think, well, I've had a team working on this for months. Your team was also working on this for a few weeks. Apparently, you didn't communicate with my team, so we were just spinning our wheels. And after that happens, one time, yeah, you get a conversation with with one of your sponsors, and you realize, okay, like I need to be more collaborative earlier on. Like I thought, oh, haha, here's the solution. Let's be collaborative around the solution. That's too late. That's too late in the game. So when we do have those disagreements, for me, it's a learning, and it's an opportunity to improve the relationship from that point on and say, okay, great, I must have missed something. If the options that we've generated, that the team and I have come together and said, these are the best ways forward. If none of these fit, then we missed something in the brief earlier.
I feel like it's all about. I feel like you are approaching every conversation as if you are responsible for everything that's happening, and I also understand that sometimes it's yes, exactly. So as an expert, you're usually responsible for the result, but sometimes I know that people keep shifting gears and shifting directions, and you agree on something and they do totally different, even though they told you 5 times that they understood and agreed. So what is your approach to ensure that you are still on track?
This is from my time in hospitality, but there's a great motto that one of the founders of 11 Madison Park had, and it was always assume the best in people. And I have found that that is an easy way to slide past any internal politics, any roadblocks that are being thrown up. Just give people that grace up front. Understand when someone is being a roadblock, when someone is kind of, throwing sand in the gears. Don't just ignore that. But when that begins to happen, have a conversation with that person, uh, that you see clearly what what is going on, or potentially that this is what you see and this is what it could be, and try and sort it out. I mean, again, so I could bring up a real life example. I was working on a large scale SEO implementation for a company that did automations. So
Mm.
they were selling enterprise automation software, and this is kind of pre, ChatGPT. That they were one of the early movers in the automation space. And the in-house SEO expert that they had would take the deliverables that my team and I would send over, and just copy paste them into a document and present them as their own. Uh, and it only took us a couple iterations to realize, oh, this is exactly what's happening. Like it's not just like they're very similar; they're facsimiles. Um, and we the project lead, and I was the project manager, had a conversation, very brief conversation with this person. They said, no, that's not what's happening. You're full of it. And it happened one more time, and so then we kind of passed everything on to our superiors and said, look, like we are going to break down as a program, as a project, if we're not rowing in the same direction, right? And if there are additional resources that we could be supplying elsewhere, great. But it doesn't make sense for us to just give someone, their homework essentially.
Yeah.
Uh, and so yeah, like you're going to encounter those kinds of scenarios, and sometimes people that have agendas that are completely counter to what you're trying to implement. I say, the only way through that I've ever experienced is kindness. And even when someone is actively trying to undermine you, it really doesn't improve your life, and it certainly doesn't improve the lives of people around you, for you to be, vindictive or upset or angry, because that's going to then seep into everything else that you're trying to do. And yeah, you'll be worse off for it.
I feel like you are really lucky that you had this hospitality experience, and I totally understand that it's like life-changing experience, but unfortunately, like many freelancers do not have this experience. So I'm curious, what from your perspective, from your thoughts, what is one small step or like one small habit that freelancers can implement or develop to build stronger client relationships over time?
So this is something from improv that a lot of people in hospitality use. It's called yes and. I'm sure a lot of people have heard about it. It's not a foolproof method, but it is a great way to uncover more of what your client needs. And if you begin with yes, then people are more likely to pay attention to whatever comes next. Whereas if you begin with no, they start to think about their response as to why it should be yes. And yes doesn't mean agree to everything. I think that's a freelancer's nightmare and really the way to sink your own credibility and to eventually overload yourself and all sorts of kind of negative professional outcomes can come from just loading yourself up with yes. But for instance, if you said, "Can I get an enhanced project timeline for 6 months after this implementation that you've led," which would be say out of scope, I'd say yes. And what role do you think I'll be playing in that next six month timeline? And how detailed do you need that to be? Because I can, they know I can. That's why they're coming to ask me. So saying no would be damaging, I think, to my professional credibility. However, just saying yes ends the conversation in a way that cheapens, right, the value that I'm bringing to the table. So there are always, again, in conversations, there are always places to pivot. And as a freelancer, to I'd say protect your time and to demonstrate your value, looking for where that and is going to land you
Mm.
is going to be a very powerful tool as you develop as a communicator, as a relationship builder, and obviously as an executor. It also gives you a beat. This is something that I learned in hospitality with the yes and. If I say yes and I give myself those moments to then think about where I'm going to be to taking that next. And sometimes the answer is just no, and then you could explain why, right? Because some requests are just a little off the wall. But most of the time, the sort of diplomatic way through is to find that yes and avenue.
I can imagine a client like telling, "Oh, would you like to work for free for us for 5 years?" And like, "Yes, and just send $5 million to my account, and I'll be happy to do that."
Yes,
So,
that's right. I will work for free for $5 million anytime. I'll let everyone know that.
exactly. Jeremy, I wish to have the sky as a limit to our conversation, but time is a limit. So the final question, what is your favorite food?
This is an easy one. Bangin Bartha, which is a roasted eggplant dish. There are different variations on the subcontinent. But yeah, I have had this as my favorite food for more than half my life. I remember the first time I ate it, I thought, well, this is it. I don't need anything else. I once ate it every day for dinner for 2 weeks, and I didn't
Wow.
tire of it at all. So it is still my favorite dish. I'm actually making some this weekend.
Got it. Got it. And what is the best way to connect with you?
The best way to connect with me would be through LinkedIn. You can go to LinkedIn. I'm Jeremy M. Coffey, is my slash handle. But there are a number of other ways that I can communicate, but probably LinkedIn would be the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Got it. Jeremy, thank you so much for sharing your experience. And it's been such a pleasure to hear and learn from you.
Thank you for hosting me. Thank you for having me, Yuri.
And thank you so much for listening. If you like the show, hit the like button on 5 stars and share it with your friend. That's it. We're done. See you in the next episode.